everybody to this. Welcome everybody to this conversation with Bolu Babalola, the author of Honey and Spice. And I am so excited to be in conversation with you. How are you doing, Bolu?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here. Really, really excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me and for doing this.
Yes, no, I was so excited because when Cheche Books reached out to me, I had literally bought your book on Audible. And I was really getting caught up in like that hot, steamy romance and all the drama. This just felt like synergy.
It's meant to happen.
Yes, it was really, really meant to happen. And I've listened to your book, which I loved. I'm sure there are people who will be watching this later or are watching now who may have read your book, may have listened to your book. Other people may yet be getting ready to read the book. And I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of a teaser, do a say a 5-minute reading to warm us all up.
Absolutely. Well, I thought the best place to start would be the meet cute, right? And if for anyone who doesn't know, the meet cute in any rom-com or romance is the moment where the two leads, the two people who are to fall in love, meet. The meet cute. And I thought it encapsulates a lot of their dynamic. So this is it. So just to give a bit of context, Kiki, the main character, is leaving a hookup. And on the way from the hookup, she bumps into this guy. And she refers to the guy she hooked up with as my guy. I hit a very firm, warm wall, my nose squishing against the soft cotton of a slate gray shirt. Shit, my bad. Nah, it's cool, don't. The voice was low and smooth, thick like honey sunk to the bottom of a tumbler of cognac. I looked up, but only enough, because I found that only reached his nose. It traveled down his face narrowly and then curved out drastically, majestically. I mean, it was quite enough to look at, but I thought I'd try again. I tilted my head a little further up till I hit black quartz gazing at me, glinting. He was looking at me like he knew me. And that was weird for a number of reasons, including, but not limited to the fact that I knew everybody in the Black Caucus of Whitewell College. I knew every clique, subgroup, and faction. And granted, it was the third week of his second year, so there was a bunch of new people, but even so, I flicked through my mental Rolodex of Mandem and came up blank. He wasn't part of the Nigerian princes, sons of Nigerian politicians. The faux roadmen studying pharmacy at the red brick university is not the same as dealing, sweetie. The future shiny suits who read, a group that could include any of the above, but usually studied something finance related, sought to work in the city, wanted an educated girl who knew her place, quite fine, and included my guy. Nor the water into wine at the club, Bible study boys, nothing. Looking at his face seemed to actually contribute to my mind blankness, which was bizarre because my mind was never blank unless made purposely so. Like when my guy was trying to talk to me about the 48 laws of power one time. He blinked and cleared his throat, even though when I heard his voice the first time, it didn't sound like it could get any clearer. Don't sweat it. Funny you should mention that because my skin was tingling. This was intriguing. I didn't really sweat. And when I did, like the time went on elliptical for 2 hours while watching Beachella on my phone, it was like this, a slight prickle. I don't sweat, but thanks. I started to move past him to the left, encouraging him to do the same, towards his destination, his destiny, away from me, when he stopped suddenly, turned around, dark brows furrowed. I'm sorry. Did you just say you don't sweat? I cast a gaze across the hall, partly to obnoxiously demonstrate the fact that no one else could have just said that, and also double check that nobody was coming out or coming in. I knew every Black Rellion who lived on my guy's floor. I'm timed my visit knowing that 2 of them were at Bible study, 1 at football, and another at a friend's birthday dinner. There was nobody. I wouldn't be seen. I looked back at him, hitched a shoulder upwards. Yeah, why? He nodded, eyes squinting, concentrating the light, the corner of his plush mouth quirking up. Well, sweating is a regular biological human function. What's your point? As he was saying you're not a regular human. I smiled, slid my head to the side. Do I look like a regular human to you? Trick question. He'll stumble or leave, stumble and leave. It was fun tangling my words around their ankles without them realizing and then watching them trip. He inhaled deeply, like he was considering the question. He stepped back a little, assessed me, flicked a quick gaze down me that felt like he was striking a match against my body. Something flared under my skin. His eyes rose to meet mine again. Nah, definitely not regular, he smiled, and my pulse stuttered. Just not used to seeing another superhuman about, so I had to double check. It makes me feel less lonely. So thank you. It's a little snippet.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Of
that.
course.
And I think for me, part of what I really love about your book is I feel like it almost revolutionizes the romance genre. I'm one of those people who grew up reading Millicent Boone, Silhouette, and like at the same time you enjoy it, but at the same time it's so frustrating.
Right.
So maybe can you speak a little bit to how the story came to you?
So I've always loved romance. I always write romance. I started writing very, very young. And when I say very young, I mean like 12, 13, 14. So I'm making up stories earlier than that. And the thing that I always wrote were just like love stories. Obviously, there are very few versions of love stories, but there were love stories. And so this story was always brewing in me. I mean, I've written rom-coms throughout university, but this one just felt right to me because, I was in an ACS, much like Kiki, the African Caribbean Society, in a British university. And I just wanted to write a story about that Black girl who, for that Black girl who really wanted to see herself and to feel held and feel seen as well, and who's disallowed from a genre. But more importantly, this just felt like a story that was on my spirit. I just wanted to write about a complicated girl who is sweet, but is also not like the girl next door. She's a little bit messy, she's confused, she's been through things. And to write her and to write the love that finds her was just important to me. And I think that university, or rather that age of like 19, 20, where you're like, you're kind of leaving adolescence and then kind of going towards adulthood, it's such a pivotal time in our life. And I feel like there's not a lot of books that kind of encapsulate that or talk about finding your family and finding yourself. And you've just been a child, you're just leaving childhood, but now you have to be an adult, and the bumps that it takes to get to that place where you kind of know yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like part of what was really special about this book was there was the romance at the core, but there were also all of these very much real issues coming up. I don't want to give too much away, but there's the issue of grief, there's being estranged from your dad, and I think for me as well, what I thought was really special about your book was it weaves so many things, right? It's like there's a radio show in the book. I want to listen to that radio show. Can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, so Kiki has a radio show where she gives romantic advice to the female populace of Whitewell University. But within Whitewell University, the ACS is called Blackwell. And that's her community. And yeah, first of all, I love music. I love R&B and soul. And so it was really fun for me to be able to incorporate that. Kiki's show called Brown Sugar incorporates a lot of R&B and soul. And I think, Blackness is such a tapestry, and she's British Nigerian, but she grew up on like Black American music. And I thought it was really important for me to incorporate that. But also I think it's such a nice dichotomy and to create the complication of Kiki. She's somebody who has her guards up towards romance, who's been through so much, and she feels equipped to give romantic advice to the girls of the university. And where does that come from? So clearly she respects and loves romance, but also she kind of protects herself from it, and she wants to protect other girls. By the same token, she's, by creating this community where the women can talk about their feelings and their emotions to her, she's creating a safe space. And yet in the book, she has her guards up to community because she's so scared of being hurt because of her past trauma with friends and other girls. So, the radio station was such a great way to to kind of show the intricacies of her personalities. Like she has so many contradictions in her, like so many of us do, but also to show a young woman who is, and one part of her is so unapologetic about her voice. She's literally has a mic and she's not afraid to use it. But when it comes to herself sometimes, when it comes to her most vulnerable moments, she's scared to talk about it, or she doesn't want to talk about it, or she runs away from it. And I think that, you know, so much of the time, Black women, young Black women, are either seen as like strong, and if we're soft at all, it's just kind of like, it's a weakness. And I wanted to show the complications of that, and how, you know, Kiki is a strong, strident woman, but she's also vulnerable and tender and has been through stuff. And sometimes she doesn't always feel like she's equipped, you know, she's insecure sometimes.
And I think it's beautiful the way you portrayed that, you know, and you
Thank
mentioned
you.
about how like music and pop culture is just really like an important part of your life. That definitely came across in the book. Like yesterday, I was like, oh, let me go on Spotify and see there's a playlist connected to the book. And of course there is. Like the minute I finished listening to the book, I just went back to all of these like 90s R&B that I used to listen to. So thank you for that as well. It made the book really
cool.
And I was wondering, because I'm a writer, I love to ask other writers about their writing process. Were you listening to music as you were writing the book? Were these songs just in your head?
Yeah. It's I don't know, my relationship with music is so funny, because sometimes, yes, I will be listening to music during certain moments. But usually I can only do that when I'm in a groove. So I know the scene that I'm in. Normally it's a romantic scene. They're having a conversation, and so I can zone out. But I can't listen to music when I'm still trying to figure something out, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
However, when my brain is turned off, in terms of like, although my brain is never turned off in terms of like writing a story, but technically when my brain is turned off and I'm listening to music, that's also when I get most inspired by lyrics and music and mood. And I can be listening to a song and be like, oh, like this is the song playing when Kiki and Malachi first kiss, or, you know, like, you know, when she first realized she's in love with him, like, oh, this lyric reminds me of that. And then in that way, it inspires me to go and write something down. So yeah, it really depends.
And for everybody who is watching, listening, if you have a question, make a note of your question, maybe put it in the chat, or just, you know, put your hand up so I know you have a question, and then I can come to you. But let's talk about Malachi. Oh my God.
Oh, Malachi.
Fine brother who's got his ish together. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so it's so funny. I kind of call it like the reverse Adam and Eve effect when I write my male protagonist, because I start with a woman first, I build her up, then I'm like, okay, so who is the guy that is worthy of her? You know, how can he, yes, this has to be attraction. How do they go together? What pulls them together? But also, how does she challenge him, or how does he challenge her? You know, because not just about getting along and sexual chemistry, of course that's important, but it's also like, how does he help her grow? And likewise, how does she help him grow? So that's how I wanted a Malachi to be somebody where, you know, because Kiki has her guards up, to somebody who can disarm her, you know, who with ease and humor, and provide a safe space. And Malachi ultimately is a softie. You know, he's a real softie. He's very gooey inside, and I think that it gives Kiki the space to be herself and feel comfortable. And I also needed him to be to have humor as well, because Kiki's a very intelligent young woman, and I think she needed somebody who was also very intelligent and also very witty to match her. That's very important. I think she would get very bored easily. And of course I wanted somebody who was sexy, but more importantly, somebody who is so openly in desire of Kiki, who really embraces her and finds her sexy, because so many Black women, we're told, especially dark-skinned Black women, that we're not sexy enough, you know. And I really wanted this to be an unapologetic, like, almost like thirst for her, essentially. Yes. But I didn't want him to be like this flawless prince. So of course Malachi is a bit of an F-boy in the beginning. Of course it takes a while for him to figure out his own emotions. Of course he kind of does things that are hurtful because of his own heart, because that's natural. And also I wanted to write a vulnerable Black man. So, you know, we see him going through things, you know, with his conflict with his dad, and, you know, and it's a lot of pressure to be this man who can figure everything out. And he has emotional vulnerabilities too. And I wanted to write a man who's going through that as well, you know, because he's all the thing. He's super macho, but he's also, you know, very soft and vulnerable at the same time.
Yeah, no, I really loved his character. I felt like you couldn't help but fall in love with his character. He was just like almost perfection, which is what I feel like you almost want in a romance novel, right? For the male lead. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can we speak a little bit about the people that I think of almost as the supporting cast, you know, this fabulous group of friends, her bestie, the publicist. Yeah. Tell us a bit about those characters. Those were really, you know, interesting to read as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really important for me to build a community around Kiki because for me, I don't know, I love romances where the world feels very full and rich, and there's a world that exists outside of the two romantic leads. I feel like that's realistic, and I like to ground my stories in a realistic world, you know, so we can actually imagine it existing in our world. And for me, the parallel love story is 100% Amina and Kiki. Amina is Kiki's best friend. She is the love of her life, and I think that's so true of my relationships. You know, my best friends, my girls are my sisters. And it's also telling that Kiki's first heartbreak in the book is because her best friend, you know, turned her back on her when she needed her the most. And I think there's sometimes we gloss over that, you know, that like friendship heartbreaks can hurt so much, you know, at any age, but particularly when you're young, because your friends are everything. You don't really have much else going in your life, and our friends take up so much space in our lives. I mean, they should always, but particularly when you're young. And so it was really important for me to see Kiki kind of grow from that trauma and that hurt and open her heart up to more friends. And so my favorite part of the book, you know, one of my favorite parts of the book was actually writing her friendship group growing, and to allow Chioma and Shanti into her heart and into her friendship group with Amina, because those girls kind of grow a sisterhood and a bond, and those friendships often happen in university. And I really loved writing about that evolution. And actually one of my favorite parts is when like Kiki confesses something to them, and they're like, girl, we love you, we know it wasn't malicious. And I think there's a grace in the friendships, and I think it's so important to write grace in female friendships. So yeah, the community was important, but even for the guys, you know, Malachi has coffee, he has Meji, who owns the diner that they frequent, and Meji actually gives Malachi a safe space to go to when he's harassed by the police. They have a support system in a community, and when you're in university, or even when you're 19, 20, or early 20s, you're looking to find a new family. You're figuring out who your community is. And yeah, it was really important to write that, because that is a different form of romance and a different form of love for me.
Absolutely. And it was beautiful to see like all of those different types of romance. It's like the book is doing so many things on so many different levels.
Thank
you.
Let
me just check in with the audience. Do folks have any questions? Any comments? I see Indigo is appreciating Malachi and the mention of his yansh.
I feel like that was Amina, but yeah, he has a great butt.
Yes. I have lots of questions, so I just want to wait and see if anybody has any question. If you do, this is the time to ask. The other thing I wanted to comment on was just the humor and sarcasm and snack in the books. White wow, black wow. Almost every other line from Kiki, you know, also loved really the language, the incorporation of Yoruba as well. Can you speak to the choices that you made?
In terms of the sarcasm and snark, I have to say that's just me. And I think that, I don't know, I am a complete romantic and I love romance, but I almost like to undercut, I don't want to say corniness, but the sweetness, the little bit of bite. I think that's me. That's very much me, you know, sweet and sour. I think that's much, I mean, the title's called Honey and Spice, so
Yeah.
that's very much, it's very much me, it's very much Kiki. And I think also romance, for me, romance is so fun when there's a little bit of barbs, you know. Malachi and Kiki have this back and forth and this flow together, and for me that's really sexy to write, and also sexy when you're flirting, because it means that you've met somebody who meets your match, and it's not just like, I love you, you're beautiful, you're this, you're that, which is so important. That I think there should be space to, like, you know, make fun of each other for a little bit, you know, and have that banter and to make fun of the same things at the same time, because that's also really, really bonding. In terms of the language, so there's two things, like the way I write, I kind of write in a very fluid way because I love poetry. Obviously, I've mentioned before, I love R&B and I love soul. And so, you know, I tried to write poetry, but it wasn't as satisfying for me. And I realized poetry is most satisfying for me when I incorporate it into my prose. And so that's why a lot of it is kind of like, it kind of, sometimes it reads like that. And sometimes you might see a cheeky little rhyme, or like, you know, I kind of write in a little bit of a rhythm, because that's how I think. And I just love it when I just love writing in that flow. And it just, yeah, especially when it's romance. I feel like romance is so kind of simpatico with that kind of style of writing. It suits me. And also I think in terms of, you know, I'm Yoruba, and I think that our language is so intricate in the way it describes feeling and emotion. It's such a descriptive language, and it's such a poetic language. And I think that almost me writing like that, because even when Yoruba writers write in English, you can still sense that patter of our language. And I think that's the legacy that I'm carrying on in terms of that. Sometimes intuitively, but even giving myself the freedom to do that, you know. I think that's been like, I think reading writers that have come before me has legitimized that way of writing for me. I think when I was younger, it almost got beat out of me, because I was educated in England, and, you know, it was a very formal way of writing. And then when I was reading African writers and even South American writers, you know, who I think there's a diasporic connection there, I felt liberated to write in that way. And then in terms of the Yoruba, that was very natural to me, and I just really wanted to write Black British Nigerians how we are, which is that Yoruba is very much part of our language, and the way that we speak. And I didn't want to give a translation to it either. I just wanted people to figure it out in context, because I think there's a way that sometimes we are encouraged to write as African writers in a way that otherizes ourselves and exoticizes ourselves. And I just I mean, that's not me anyway, but I was very conscious of not playing into that, which is why even when you see Yoruba words, they're not italicized.
Yes. No, and that was beautiful. As somebody who was also listening to it, right? It's beautiful to hear the rhythm of another language, and it flows. And even if you don't understand, you get what they're talking about because of the context. So I'm really glad you made the choices that you did. And if I'm correct, Bolu, you're also a screenwriter. Is that correct?
I am also a screenwriter, yes.
And there was something very, like, I could literally see the story.
Oh, thank you.
Is this being turned into a film? Are you able to share anything along those lines?
I am not allowed to share anything along those lines, but I will just say that your girl's a screenwriter as well. So keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, I am keeping my eyes peeled. And in a dream world, who would you love to play Kiki and Malachi?
So this is a thing that I've obviously thought about a lot. But for Kiki, actually, Kiki is going to be, I think she's going to be an unknown star. I think that I don't think she's famous yet. I want her to be a revelation, because you know, we have such Black women, especially dark-skinned Black women, have such little opportunity for roles that are deserving of them, you know, like for nuanced roles. And I just feel like it would just be nice to give somebody a chance with the role like Kiki, especially because Kiki herself is coming into her own. And I think it would just be a beautiful continuation of like her story, to have somebody who hasn't got the platform yet to shine. For Malachi, somebody like Damson Idris, of course. I mean, Damson Idris is a Yoruba man from South London, so he's pretty much Malachi. Yeah, somebody with that sauce and that swagger would be great. But fun facts though, he's not British, but Kofi Cerebro was actually like, so the illustration of Malachi at the back, I sent several pictures of Kofi Cerebro to my editor and said, make sure the first draft wasn't good enough. I said, he has to look as sexy as him. So yeah, so whoever plays Malachi has to be incredibly good looking.
yes, we're down for it. We're really down for it. Okay, I want to give the audience another chance to ask questions. Don't be shy. If you have a question you want to ask Bolu, this really is your opportunity. All right,
Yes.
go for it.
Okay. So just as we had planned this meeting to be an hour, I think, I'm not sure, I'm going to confirm, we might have an upgrade to Zoom Pro in the middle of the meeting. So yeah, technology. Bolu, when I read Honey and Spice, something came off as very striking to me, which was the importance of spaces. Because I think when Malachi takes Kiki out to eat, and he completely describes the joint as somewhere where he's very nonchalant, he's very not thinking about heavy stuff. And at first, I was reading that and I was like, oh, okay, that's the joint that he's never taken anyone other than Kiki. But then later on, I started thinking about it and I was like, if this is the place that he deems as a haven of some sort of non-judgmental comfort, what do spaces mean to you ultimately as you are crafting that restaurant?
So thank you so much for that question. I mean, even the fact that the universe, this novel is set in Blackwell says, a lot about what spaces mean to me. I think, first of all, I wanted to show that it was a gesture, right? Because him allowing Kiki into that space was a show of vulnerability. Second of all, that place was literally a safe place for him, because when he was being harassed by the police, Meggie took him in and like, come eat, settle yourself. But also as a place in this it's kind of like an oasis where young Black people can just be, and they have music and they have the food and it's just relaxation and it's a bubble, and I think they can just reset and it's a relief. And I think that sometimes as Black people in the diaspora, anywhere actually, we don't realize how much pressure and emotion we are holding in our bodies. And I think when Malachi enters that space, I mean, Kiki says it, like, he's just easy. He's greeting people, he's comfortable, and it's so important to have that kind of space. And when Kiki comes into her own later on in the book, that space is also where she comes, and it becomes like a haven and a bubble for them. But yeah, I think it's very, very, very important. Spaces that are physical but also emotional. I
want to come back to something we're chatting about just before this recording started, which is that there is a book within a book.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's this fantasy series. How did that come to you? And are you a lover of the fantasy genre as well? Should we expect a fantasy novel?
Oh gosh, I am. That just came off the fly, because after I wanted to make Kiki a geek, and because she's so like abrasive and like has this cool girl persona, I was like, I want to also make her secretly a nerd. And then when I started writing it, I was like, oh no, I wanted to really love this book. And then when I started writing the book, I was like, there's no way that I can write about this book without figuring out what this book is. And then the storyline started coming, and I had to pull myself back, because it almost became a book within a book, and I was like, I had to stop. But I love the fantasy genre. I'm a little bit like Kiki in that, like, I'm a bit of a nerd for it. But again, we have the same problem. Like, the fantasy novels that I used to read, I didn't see me reflected. And so, that's what kind of also where Love and Color came from. I got to kind of flex those muscles a little bit. But yeah, I do want to write a fantasy novel at some point. It might not be Reigns of Iconia. It might be something else. But it will probably be like along those lines. But Reign of Konya was kind of, in my head, it's like based on Yoruba mythology. And I had a really fun time making up the names and making up the main characters. So, you know, maybe there might be a special edition Honey and Spice one day with a chapter of Reigns of Konya.
Amazing. That will be so cool.
Hello.
Speaking of special edition Honey and Spice.
Yeah.
A little birdie called Entertainment Weekly. Yes. Told us something about sun under skin 2 seconds after we had just touched Honey and Spice. How is that coming along?
Yes. How's it coming along? Well, it's coming. Right now, it's like 70 pages of notes. It's weird because like I have the notes. So Sun Under Skin, for anyone who doesn't know, is the sequel to Honey and Spice that I'm working on right now.
Oh, I was about to ask if there was going to be a sequel. What's it called?
Yes. Sun Under Skin.
Oh. And
it's set around 8 to 10 years after this book is finished. It's a second chance romance, so take from that what you will. And it's gonna, I mean, this is not a spoiler, but it's gonna be based around Amina and Kofi are getting married.
Perfect.
Yes, and so that is the main thing. But the main characters will still be Kiki and Malachi. Yes. But the impetus, the thing that kind of propels the story is like, you know, there's gonna be a wedding at the end. Whose wedding is it? We don't know. But it's about growth and evolution, you know, because I was really wanted to ask myself the question of like, what happens to Malachi and Kiki? After I finished writing the novel, I didn't feel like I was done with their love story. And I knew that they were going to be forever. But I was like, what does forever mean? When you meet when you're kids, and you go through your own evolutions and you still need to figure yourself out and you have to go through growing pains. What does that mean? Do you have to like come apart to come back together again? Or is it just a love story that just exists without you having to be together? So those are the questions that I'm going to be answering in the second book.
Exciting. Cannot wait. Yes, go on.
I want to, who is Zach based on? Because Zach, oh my God. Oh, why?
The worst men. All of the worst men that I've ever met in my whole life.
Is it the tinge of white in him?
Maybe, sure. But there's only one. Somebody actually asked me that in a Q&A. I didn't know what to say. They're like, what problem do you have against mixed race people? I was like, I don't have a problem against mixed race people. I do not have a problem against mixed race people. Zach just happens to be a dick. That's all. But also it's just the fact that, you know, I wanted to write him as what is deemed super desirable, you know, and because he's been told it's desirable his whole life, he doesn't question it, you know, and so he manipulates it. And so that's really what I wanted to come across, because he's been told his whole life that he's the shit, you know, he has his light eye, he's a very pretty boy, he could be a model, he's accepted in all facets of the university, and he thinks that nothing can touch him. And is palatable, you know, he's actually being used by the white people in the university. So that's also when I wanted to kind of use that to explain.
So I'm conscious of the countdown, and we are literally counting down now. This has been an amazing conversation. Bolu, for people who want to check out more of your work, where should they go to? How can people like follow you on the socials?
Follow me on Twitter, Bebabs, BWEBABS. I'm there tweeting way too much. On Instagram, Boluberry, BOLUBERRY. I have a newsletter that you can subscribe to that is in my bios, on my link tree, and I write sporadically on there. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. So reading Honey and Spice, and also Loving Color as well, if you'll hear from there. This was such a great chat. Thank you so much, Nana. Thank you so much, Cheche. This was so great.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. We love the
Cheche and get Honey and Spice.
We love
Loving Color.
Love it.
And the sex lives of African women.
Yes, such a good book.
Thank you, Bolu. All right, lots of love, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.